Welcome, everyone. This is our second PERC Education Job Fair Pre-Fair panel. And we are so grateful to have with us some of our gold sponsors this evening to provide their time and expertise to help you to prepare for the fair. So we are going to start by asking each of our panelists to please introduce themselves. And to make this easy, we are going to go in alphabetical order. So you notice your names are at the bottom of the screen to make this a little bit easier. Can we begin with you, Nate, please?
Sure. Hi, guys. Pleasure to be here. One of my favorite times of year is recruiting. I'm Nate Bopp. I have the pleasure of being a middle school principal in Culpeper, Virginia. My little bio says 5-star recruiter. That was supposed to be a joke and not supposed to be in there. So I'm sorry that that's in there. My HR department did that, and they're going to get it tomorrow. But I'm really excited to talk with you guys about what it is to be a teacher in 2022.
Maggie.
Sorry, I don't have the same view as you, so didn't know exactly what order I was in for alphabetical. Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm with Southern Teachers. We are a placement agency working with about 700 private and independent schools in the South. And I am the recruitment coordinator. So my job is to speak with students such as yourselves looking for their first jobs out of college.
And Shannon.
I'm Shannon Hagan. I am the supervisor of staffing for Harford County Public Schools in Maryland. Previous teacher myself, but jumped over to the HR side. So I'm very excited to talk to all of you tonight.
Thank you.
So I get the pleasure of getting us started and kicking things off. We will start with just one question at a time. We're going to go in the same order that we just did introductions for this first question. So Nate, how would you suggest candidates prepare for the virtual job fair?
It's a good question. It's definitely a different world than a traditional PERC year. When we used to go to PERC before COVID, I used to look at like a huge 4-H camp. I mean, they ring this bell, and the next thing you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of teachers, and your job is to sort of let yourself stand out and kind of get people. You know, as a candidate for a virtual fair, I can just tell you, if you've reached this point, it means you're ready to be a teacher. And I think you need to go into any kind of interview that you have, particularly virtually, with that confidence. What I tell people a lot, particularly in Virginia, I know a lot of people from Pennsylvania, they say, you know, I would love to go back and teach in my high school that I went to, or the middle school, or whatever. And I know that's just a little bit more difficult up north. If you're good and you're confident and you come to Virginia, there's a good chance if you interview with 10 schools, you're going to have 10 offers. So what I always tell people is make sure you know what you want. Make sure that you understand that you do have options, and be careful, because there are some principals out there that are going to be really, really pushy and promise you the world, when in reality that might not be the case in their building. So I would say just be ready with what you want. You know, ask good questions, you know, particularly about mentorship, particularly about supports within the school building, and how they're supported outside of it as well. Because when you're a brand new teacher, it's a difficult world. I always say that the second year is like summer camp. So come prepared, know what you want, and then really pay attention to the vibe you get from people that you're interviewing with.
Maggie?
Okay. So what we found with virtual fairs in particular is that they're much more structured, and some of the conversations you have, especially with the time limits, can be a little more formulaic as you're trying to just build that connection and get through people, and then you've got someone else, you know exactly when they're coming and when you have to go move to the next. So the best way for you to be prepared about that is to do your research ahead of time. You have more information about the employers just right at your fingertips because of the way virtual fairs are organized than you would if it were an in-person fair. And the best thing to do is make use of that. And if you go through and you really are meeting with the schools that most match your interests, come up with one question for each of them, one real question that you actually want the answer to, and you will have a very productive fair because you'll get the information relevant to your job search out of it. So really what it comes down to with virtual fairs more than anything is the preparation.
Excellent tip. Shannon?
So Seems kind of silly, but watch your surroundings when you're in a virtual fair. We probably have all seen some silly things happening during virtual fair. So make sure you're in a secure place, professional background. I still want to see candidates professionally dressed. So I don't even care if you are business on top and party on the bottom that we can't see, but we still want to see professionally dressed. We've seen cats walk across the screen, all kinds of crazy things. So just be prepared of your surroundings. Also, like the other two said, do your homework, see what booths you want to visit, which might fit your interests, but also explore a little bit because it is a buyer's market out there. You can go anywhere you want to go. So do a little bit of exploring just to see, because you might find a fit that you never thought that you would. So like I said, definitely do that. Virtual is hard for recruiters because sometimes we sit there the entire time and nobody might visit our booth, and we have a lot to sell to you. So explore a little bit. And then also when you do your homework, look at school systems' full compensation package. Some that are ready to explore outside their immediate area, just look at salary, but look at some of those things that Nate even suggested as well. Look at what teacher supports they're offering, look at what tuition reimbursement, and also look at benefits. That is something a lot of new candidates forget to look at because you can stay on your parents for a while, but when you get off your parents' insurance, you could be paying a lot more for your insurance at a school system that is offering a larger salary. And then that larger salary is eaten up by your healthcare. So look at what they're offering for healthcare.
And look at rent prices.
Yeah.
Look at Zillow. You would be shocked.
Yeah, these are definitely fantastic tips. Please, everyone, pay attention to all this. So the next thing is a lot of our candidates are preparing their resumes. They're trying to prepare for meeting with employers during the fair. So what are employers seeking in strong candidates? What kind of experience, what kind of skills, what kind of qualities? If you could each speak to that, and we're going to go one more time in alphabetical order, and then we'll kind of mix it up.
So that's me first. Okay. I think when you guys are writing your resumes and getting ready to answer these questions, make sure that you put a focus on the actual experience that you have had with students. Particularly at the middle school level, where I've been for my entire career, you'd be amazed at what we can fit you into based on what you put on that piece of paper. I mean, there are a lot of options for you, particularly coming out of Pennsylvania, where a lot of you are dual certified. Make yourself stand out. When me as a principal, when I'm reading your resume, although it might be good work experience that you've worked at these other places that don't have anything to do with education, don't put that on there. Make sure you're focusing on this was where this practicum, if you student taught, what you did, the type of students you were with. If you were in a collaborative setting with special education students, focus on that. Anything that can set you apart that says, hey, I've got more experience than maybe this piece of paper looks like it might have. Because a lot of times the only thing we see is this piece of paper, and then we meet you and we want to be able to say, hey, tell me about that when you were with seventh grade this. I think we're looking for people that can be flexible and people that know what they want. Like I said, Shannon said it is a buyer's market, and that is absolutely true.
To piggyback off that, sort of highlighting what helps you show your strengths, not just what makes a strong candidate, because in 15 minutes, not everyone can tell really what your strengths are. It's about how well you're communicating your strengths. And one of the best things you could do is to make a concise resume. We see resumes that are 3 or 4 pages for people who have no work experience. That's not what we need. What we need is 1 page that tells us the story of your experience. That mean don't include different jobs you've had working with kids. That means we probably understand what you did in your student teaching. And unless there's something truly distinct about your experience, you don't need a full description. You need a line saying what it was and maybe the grade level. And then list all the experiences you've had working with kids. You don't have to leave off the tutoring you did first year and the time you were a camp counselor for the whole entire summer. That experience helps you when you get in the classroom. That is experience managing a group of students, managing a group of kids, and it's relevant, and we want to hear about it. So just because you have several practicums, don't think that means the other experiences you have working with kids are now irrelevant, because they're not.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon?
So one of the first things we're looking for is that you're student-centered. Any of your responses, it's always students first. And we really want to see that to come out as well in your personality. I will tell you that's one of the first things that I look for is personality. I want to see that personality that's going to be in front of my students and that my students are going to love. We can fill some of those skill gaps. You might not be perfect at classroom management. You might not be perfect at assessment. And we have lots of supports in place to help you fill those gaps, but we really want to see that personality. And it's nerve-wracking. You're you're interviewing with somebody, you're on a screen, and you get nervous, but just try to take that deep breath and show that personality that we are going to see in front of our students. We also encourage you to share any of the experiences that you've had working with diverse populations. I think all of us can probably speak to that our student populations are becoming more and more diverse. So what have you done to meet the needs of diverse learners? Not just learning styles, but also racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, and just different experiences that students are coming with. So we know it's our goal to put teachers in front of our students that reflect what our students look like. Definitely not possible, but if we can have teachers that, can relate to our students in other ways and can meet their needs, that's really what we're looking for.
Awesome advice there. I hope you are all taking very good notes because these are great tips. So PERC does not just recruit for teachers. We obviously attract candidates from a wide variety of backgrounds in education. If we start with Shannon this time, can you speak to opportunities at your school district? Obviously, teaching is part of that, but in addition to that, athletic coaching, speech language pathology, counselor, school nurse, all of those sort of education-related careers.
Of course, teaching, we're looking to staff all certification areas. So we're right now, I wouldn't say that there's not one content area that we're looking for teachers. Of course, some people, if you're ready not to teach just yet, you want to ease into it. Of course, we have support professionals, our teaching assistant positions like paraeducators, also related services. So SLPs, OTs, PTs, school psych as well. School counselors, school nurses, secretary positions, custodian positions, we have it. I know a lot of people when they think, a school system, even when we go to a job fair that's not education based, they think, oh, you're looking for teachers. We're looking for pretty much anything. So anything that you're interested, we have it. We do have coaching, we have tutoring opportunities, summer opportunities for you as well. So, and then just another thing that you can think about, look at maybe what your career progression might look like. I'm kind of a poster child for that. I was a teacher and I landed in HR. So to see what other opportunities there are in a school system for you. Do you want to remain in the classroom for your entire career? Yes, that's wonderful. But if you're looking for other things, what are career ladders that they have towards administration or human resources or curriculum? Because there's lots of opportunities for that if you know that you want to branch beyond the classroom as well.
Maggie?
Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, we work with about 700 schools. So the positions that we have available really run the gamut. Obviously, the bulk of the positions are teaching positions, but we do run searches for administrative positions as well. We do not have some of the support staffing roles. We do not take some of those jobs. So while we do help school counselors find jobs, we do not work with school nurses or the administrative secretarial staff. But any role that is working with kids, pretty much we do work. We're always looking for teachers who can coach as well and are willing to participate in any kind of extracurricular. That's always one of the key things that independent schools are looking for. And then as far as professional advancement, we do, as I said, work running searches for administrators, division heads, all the way up to contracted head of school searches. So the ability to grow in an education career is absolutely there. There's movement all along. It just depends on what you're looking for.
I think this is a really important question, particularly when you are new in your career and you may have aspirations to rise farther than the classroom. I know 35 teachers that that's all they want to do, and they are excellent, and I am so happy to have them. I also have a teacher that it took me 2 questions at PERC 5 years ago to hire. I asked him 2. I said, "You're it? You want to come work for me?" He said, "Yes." He's also been an admin intern for me, and he will easily be the first assistant principal hired this next school year. That's some significant advancement within 5 to 6 years. Look for a county that has good career or some reimbursement. The county that I'm in currently right now, next year is upping it to 3 classes a year at 90% paid. And that's from all the way down to doctoral level stuff. So my little thing says Dr. Nate Bob, they paid for most of that. So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal in terms of what schools are looking for. If you can teach high school math, you can walk to Virginia and you'll get a job as soon as you cross the border. In some divisions, ours included, if you teach special education, if you're a counselor, if you're a math teacher, you actually get a stipend above and beyond the step that you're on because they're high needs and they're hard to fill. As Shannon said, school psychologists, good luck finding one. If you know any of them, send them to me. Same thing with school counselors, same thing with speech pathologists, same thing with social workers. These are really, really hard jobs to fill. And so we have people that actually started out as teachers and said, I think I might want to be a counselor. And they make that switch. The county's paying for them to get those hours, to get that degree. And they're great because they realize they're wonderful with kids, but they might not want to teach math all day. That's okay. So in the world of education right now, in 2022, it is your oyster. You can start out as one thing and very quickly become something else. There's divisions. Myself is a good example. I taught for 6 years, became an AP for 4.5, took over a building. I've been there for 6 years, and I'm looking to take the next step pretty soon. Those type of opportunities are everywhere. If you find a place that you feel comfortable with, that can sort of help you grow, there's a lot to look at there. So I think all of us said the same thing with basically whatever you want to do, you're going to be able to do it.
I think that is so exciting as a candidate, as somebody who's in the job search right now. You should all call your families and say, it's a really good time to be searching for teaching jobs.
Absolutely. So we have candidates coming from different stages. So we might have some that are, very much looking for that first teaching position. Then we might have some that maybe are looking to change districts or maybe, relocate. So different kinds of, stages. So I want to ask you all if you can share a snapshot of trends you're seeing in education to help these candidates to prepare for the future. And because we have made poor Maggie go in the middle absolutely every time, let's start with Maggie.
So one of the things that we're seeing that's really different about the jobs that we're getting in this year from jobs we've gotten in past years is that there's sort of a new niche. We talk about differentiated learning. Shannon, you talked about working with students from diverse backgrounds and with diverse learning needs. And schools are trying to fill that particular gap. We're seeing positions for teachers to work with students more one-on-one in differentiated learning roles. That's not, just to be clear, not full-time special education positions. These are more in the classroom working with kids, in the general classroom working with kids, but trying to co-teach or fill the needs of specific students within the broader classroom. It's sort of this curious role that we don't always know how to fill. Sometimes the best person for it is a retired teacher who just wants to work with some kids, helping them with their reading skills or some math skills. But we're seeing these jobs pop up that weren't there before to try and give more focused attention to students one-on-one. So expanding the type of students that you're working with and taking that extra class to talk about working with kids with ADHD or taking any sort of diverse learning experience. There's a market there because we get jobs from so many schools. There's a market there that's coming to the fore that just wasn't there 3 years ago. So that specialized skill set is really where we see things going.
That's a wonderful suggestion. And learning how to market themselves too could be really, really helpful information. Can we move on to you, Shannon?
So I will tell you some disheartening trends that we are seeing. Of course, we're seeing less people go into the field of teaching. I think all of us can speak to that. Just give you a little statistic about Maryland. Maryland, we need 6,000 teachers to replenish our pool, the entire state. And last year, Maryland only produced 1,200 teachers. So that's why we're going into PA and trying to, and other states, in order to try to bring you this way. Another thing we're seeing is a lot of teachers leave the field of teaching to go in other fields. Teaching's hard, and I think wherever you go, it's going to be hard. But if you just find that great fit, that'll help you stay and remain. So, make sure that the school system that you're going towards has some things in place to retain you, some retention efforts so that you are comfortable, because it's dangerous territory with everyone hiring right now, and you can go find a career elsewhere. So really just find that, find that place where you're comfortable, because, you spent all this money to go to school and put in this hard work. So, stay in that field of teaching by finding, that good fit for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. The level of learning loss that took place during COVID, where schools across the country shut down, and Lord knows what those kids were doing. And then we had a full year, whether it was virtual, whether it was hybrid, and then we came back this year. Imagine being a sixth grader and you didn't do anything since the end of fourth grade. That means you don't know fractions. That means you don't know a lot of things. So the level of stress that not only comes in a math class for sixth graders when you're used to knowing certain things that you don't is just wild. I mean, it used to be like kids learn to read kindergarten, first grade. They don't forget how to do it. If you've never seen a fraction, imagine that. And there's just so much ESSER money coming out there that there is specialized positions that are being added to school board budgets with the attempt to close some of these achievement gaps, which are pretty significant. And with that comes teacher burnout. So like Shannon said, teaching is hard. And if you get yourself in a building where you don't feel supported or you're not on a good team, that's even harder. So just be really selective. The trends that I'm seeing are, 5 years ago, it was, we got to get every one of these kids in front of a computer. We have to be one-to-one. We've got to integrate. Now I'm telling my teachers, guys, you got to shut those computers. We have got to get back to ground and pound, because these kids, they just don't know anything. It's not their fault. And we've got to approach them in a manner which says, okay, here's where we are. We understand there's these huge gaps. We need to grow somewhere. And I can't do that with your screen, with your nose on that computer screen, which you were there for 18 months. So it's kind of like a different world. We're sort of reinventing how we do it. And some of my old school teachers are like, that's right. I told you this is what we should have been doing. I'm like, preach, just keep going, tell the youngsters. So those are some of the trends. These kids, what you expect them to know is not necessarily what they do know. And kind of grappling with that can be intimidating, but very rewarding at the same time. If you just kind of embrace it with the kids, which you have to, you'd be surprised how far they can come.
Thank you all so much for sharing such great insight. This is phenomenal. Before we move on to any of the candidate questions, are there any other comments that any of you want to make, or any information you want to share? Please do. Okay,
I have one. I have one. Okay, I always tell this to, I've never met any of you, but I always tell this to candidates that I'm talking to. Okay, and it might be counterintuitive because I'm a principal, and I always need teachers. You need to realize it's not us interviewing you. It is you interviewing us, because you can work anywhere. So when you're sitting across from somebody, and if you get a bad vibe from them, that is a big red flag. If you're talking to a principal that's talking to you as though it would be an honor for you to work for them, you need to run, okay? Because there is nothing more important than who you work with, and on top of that, who you work for. The content is kind of a distant number 3, because every single day you've got to get out of bed and go to this building and do a hard job. And if you can do it with people that you like and people that are supporting you, and if you're lucky enough to do it with a boss that understands how hard it is, you are going to be a lot more successful than if you're just chasing maybe this exact thing I want to teach, or maybe this county offered me a little bit more money. Just remember, it is a buyer's market. And I tell candidates, I said, I'm not really interviewing you. You are interviewing me, because I know you're good. So have that confidence. And if you don't get that vibe from somebody, then keep looking, because someone will give it to you.
Any other comments before we move on to the chat?
I will agree with everything that Dr. Bob said and just visit our 3 booths first.
Yeah, come see me.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see.
Feel free to, okay, Katie is asking, is it a good question to ask about school contracts at the end of the interview, or is that a question for after you get offered a position?
Shannon, let's bow to you, Shannon, on this one.
So it depends, I guess, how you phrase, your question. It's always a turnoff if a candidate says to me, are you able to offer me a contract? And we have had people that do that. So, maybe you just want to ask a little bit more about the timeline. So if, you're not actually presented a contract in the moment, ask about the timeline. So that way you're getting around to that without being so kind of blunt about it. You'll also see a lot of school systems offering open contracts, but open contracts can vary from school system to school system on how they play those out. So you want to be careful on what you're signing. I know of some school systems that will offer you an open contract and then they place you in a school. We don't do that here. If you assign an open contract, or some people call them advanced contracts, if you sign those with us, what happens to you is your name just goes on a priority list so that school principals go after you first before they would go to the larger applicant pool, since we've guaranteed you a spot. So we never place you. We help you find that fit. But there are other school systems that will place you in hard to fill schools. So just make sure you know what you're signing.
Right. To piggyback off that, we used to be able to go to PERC and hire people on the spot and offer them a contract. I actually, at this point in my career, I tell the candidates, don't sign anything yet. I said, you need to come down and see my school. You need to come see my staff. I'd love to have you. I'd like to hire you right now. However, I'll tell them, I know how good you are. That other table over there is going to want you too. And don't let anybody pressure you in anything. We had letter of intents as well, kind of like what Shannon was talking about. We would never just place you in a school. You work for the principal that you like, or the team that you really felt, connected to. So that's a really good point. It's okay to ask about it. And, most people will have an HR representative right there. But that's, again, you guys have all the power. So kind of pushing for that right away, you don't really need to. I can make a decision within 3 questions of whether I want to hire you.
So we have another question that's related. So is it appropriate to ask what the starting salary is?
I think it can be. Most of it is public document anyway. And sometimes we actually bring pamphlets, assuming that the Board of Supervisors in your school division has approved the budget. Most of the time when you're recruiting, the budgets have not been approved. So you can say, this is where the starting salary would be if approved. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I also give the caveat of, yes, there's a division to our north called Loudoun and Fairfax, and they're going to give you this big number. Make sure you look at the rent. Make sure you look at the cost of living, because guess what? That big number disappears real quick once you look at that.
So we have another kind of related one. So would it be appropriate to ask about moving incentives since we're planning on moving from out of state?
I've never had anybody ask that. Shannon, have you?
We have some in place here. I normally don't see it at a job fair, but I've had just some individuals ask about relocation expenses. Will we pick up the cost? And there have been times for certain instances, if it was a candidate we really needed, we helped to get the U-Haul. But what we do have is we have apartment complexes that offer discounts to our employees. So you can ask them about, if you don't just want to ask about, incentives, you can about housing, you can even just ask incentives in general. Because a lot of school systems even have in place where, you get a discount for your Verizon bill, if you're an employee of the county. So lots of incentives even beyond housing. But I would just code it that way. Are there any additional incentives, that you offer your employees?
One of the things I'll say is you wouldn't really want an interviewer, one of us, to just be grilling you and peppering you with questions. And the reverse is also true. The best recruiting the best interview is a conversation. We want to talk to you, get to see your personality. We want you to get to see what we're like, what the structure of the school is, all of these things that are beyond salary. And so while this is absolutely information, you need. They might not be the best questions for your first 10 minutes, and it's something you can always ask later via email. It's if you're running through your interviews asking about salary and asking about moving incentives, you'll get a lot of numbers in response, but you probably won't make the kind of connections that you really have the opportunity to make when you're in conversation with someone.
Right. And Maggie, I think that's a really good point, which piggybacks on actually a question from Eric about, what type of information in student teaching is most valuable and the athletic piece. Eric, I'm going to be honest with you. The most valuable thing is the interview that you are going to have. That's it. Like if there's a connection with you and whoever across from you, that student teaching, while it's important that you've had some of those experiences, I can't tell you the number of people that I've hired that didn't student teach simply because it fell one semester past their graduation rate. And they went out there and said, do I really want to pay my college to student teach, or can I go get a job and have that count as my student teaching? I actually did that. I think the most important thing you can do is make a good impression. And talking about your coaching experience, I think that really helps. Almost every single coach that I have in my building also teaches for me. It helps a lot, particularly with student discipline issues, just the function of the building. I think all of those things matter, but, focus on, making a connection with who's ever across from you, and you'll know if you have it pretty quickly. And if you do, great, then you can talk about those other things. But like I said, I think that's a good point from Maggie.
And now we have something about, again, teaching out of state. What is important to ask or research when thinking about teaching in a different state? This person lives in Pennsylvania.
So you just want to ask a state if they have reciprocity. So Maryland has reciprocity by program. So as long as you've completed a state approved program in Pennsylvania or any other state, we'll transfer your certificate here. You'll also want to ask school systems, will they take care of, handling your certificate? So even in Maryland, that'll vary from county to county. We will, as long as you give us your transcripts and test scores, we'll go ahead and apply that for that certification. But other school systems have you do that process. And dealing with a state board of education sometimes is lengthy. So if you can get a school system that's going to do that for you, that's definitely helpful. But yeah, ask for reciprocity by program.
Same thing in Virginia. We have a person in our HR department that handles all of this for you. And we hire so many people from Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York. It's never an issue at all. If you're certified up there, you're going to be certified down here.
Independent schools do not have the same requirements for certification. So while your certification is still valued, they don't require it, and they don't have to do the technicalities of transferring a certificate. The way it is basically it serves the way your degree does. It's great that you have it, but it's like asking for your transcripts. All we need are your test scores, which can really be a great way it means you can really explore what's out there. It means you can really look further afield at the place you want to be, at the types of school districts, and not worry about the transfer of certification. Really opens the doors for you in some ways.
All helpful tips. Another question about speaking Spanish that does not necessarily always a skill that's always valued in Pennsylvania, but many Southern states do value the ability to speak a different language. Do your schools compensate for being bilingual?
I will tell you, we do not. It is definitely something that's like a selling point for yourself. But I would say a lot of school systems, I know in Maryland, I don't know about, in all other states, but we're unionized. So it's really hard for us to offer any type of additional compensation that's outside our negotiated agreement. So it's even hard when, there's a candidate we really like and we'd like to offer more money. You have to realize you're unionized and you get benefits out of being a part of a union, because they fight for salary increases for you. They fight for insurance benefits for you and things like that. But that also ties our hands a little bit that we can't offer any additional compensation that isn't already in our negotiated agreement.
Yeah, we are not union in Virginia, but we still, in my experience, have not offered a stipend for being bilingual. What I can tell you is you will advance in your career rather quickly if you have the desire to do so, if you can speak two languages. The amount of ESL students are significantly on the rise. I mean, we're at like 14% in our school this year, whereas 6 years ago we were like 4 or 5%. So that's growing yearly and significantly so. So it's a good question though. That's one of those things that you may be able to push for a little bit more in Virginia, depending on the division that you're talking to, because we are not union. So every division is sort of allowed to do what they want. There could be a candidate that you really need. Like I mentioned earlier, if you teach math, you're making more money than your buddy teaching English, and you may have the exact same amount of years just because it's really hard to fill those positions.
For independent, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that for independent schools, it's more like what you said with Virginia. It's not so much that there's some pay structure that you'll get an extra notch on your belt, but it's that you'll be eligible for that many more specific jobs, and you'll be more greatly desired, and negotiations are absolutely something that happen with independent schools. The pay structures don't operate the same way with the same brackets.
Thank you. This one, we have time for, we have a few more questions in the chat here. So this one is also related to teachers unions. One person wants to know that they indicate, in Pennsylvania, we have strong and active teachers unions, but they would like to learn more about how teachers are protected in other states.
Yes, I'll take that one because we're the unionized one. So protected in a lot of ways here. For one of, like I said before, they fight for salary increases for you. So for this school year, we're slated, as long as the budget gets approved, they fought for a 7% salary increase, especially with the, inflation. So they fight for that. They fight to make sure that you're compensated accurately for any of those additional duties, fight for you for your benefits, anything from transfer requirements, and just making sure that you're treated fairly. We also have tenure here, where your first 3 years with us, you're non-tenured. So they, protect you throughout your evaluation process. And then on the first day of your 4th year, you are tenured. So you're even protected more in that case. So, if something comes up and, there's issues with your performance and things like that, there's lots of things in place that protect you just from a school system, just kind of doing away with you because you're maybe having a bad year. So just lots of protections in place as well. So it's probably similar to what you're seeing in PA, but really the biggest thing is just fighting for that compensation year to year.
Yeah, in Virginia, as I said, it's not a union state, but there are still protections provided for teachers within the Virginia law. There are associations. We have the Virginia Education Association. We have a Culpeper CCA, which is sort of piggybacks on top of them. So you have representation if you ever get into a situation where you need it, as long as you're part of that membership. However, I'll still fall back to the best protection you can have is just being good at what you do. You have the power again. I mean, it's not like it was 10 years ago. Now it's, principals, you've really got to focus on building relationships with teachers, giving them the support that they need. And even if they're not having a great year, how are you going to make it better for the next one? Because it's impossible to sort of replace that person. I remember 15 years ago when I first started teaching, I never did anything wrong, and I was still always worried until I got tenure. It's the same thing after 3 years, you get tenure. Am I going to get tenure? Am I going to? Now I look back and laugh at myself. I'm thinking, you were worried about this. It's just a different mindset. Like if you're committed and you're good at what you do and you're willing to take feedback, you have nothing to worry about. In terms of fighting for compensation, while there's no union, you got to remember every division down here is their own. So my division has to fight for compensation so that you don't drive one county over to make more. So in Virginia, we're getting a 5% this year and a 5% next year for a total of 10%. And that's from the governor. So that's the state of Virginia saying, hey, we've got to do something here so that we're not losing people. It's a good question, though.
I think one final question I see in the chat is, in the one-on-one meetings for the PERC fair, what might that look like for a candidate regarding should they be asking all the questions? Will you be asking all the questions? Maggie mentioned it should be a conversation, but I think just like our K-12 students also feel this whole, I've been online for so long, now we're asking them to go do something else online, right? So it's just a different environment. If you could just walk them through what that might look like.
Do you want me to go first on this one?
Sure thing.
So here's what I would say. There's 27 of us in here. Imagine if there were only 2. And that's how I handle online interviews. So it's a conversation like this. I have 5 or 6 standard questions that I almost ask every candidate. And then I flip the table and say, okay, it's your turn. And then I remind them, remember, you're interviewing me. And that's a good time to talk about positions that you have. What is the turnover rate in your building? How many open positions do you have? These are some good questions to think, if they've got a lot of positions, maybe this is not something that I want to look into. So again, conversational, getting to know the person. Your background is important, but I think if you can form some sort of just good vibe right away and you can trust each other, that's a really good first step. And then if you get your questions answered, the next step is, I think I might want to go see that building. And then if you like the people in it, you've got like 3 for 3 right there. So that's how I typically do it.
Yeah, I would just echo that completely. It's the same exact way, maybe a question, 1 or 2, but really just a conversation. So just kind of like what we're doing now. And then we would take you through, what next steps would be, should we get that good feel.
I'll just add that, we're talking about it being a conversation and making that connection. Functionally, what that means is pausing, even though that your name is at the bottom of the screen, introduce yourself. Tell them what you're interested in teaching, ask them how their fair is going. Take the first minute or so to talk to the person there, and you don't necessarily have to jump straight into talking about the jobs that they have available. And that's how you form the basis of really making a connection. Functionally, take that first 30 seconds, a minute, and just talk to them.
Rapport building is so important. That's a wonderful tip.
I would also say, don't worry if you're an elementary person and you end up talking to a middle school person or a high school person. I recruit so much for the division that sometimes I go recruiting for the elementary schools or the high schools, and I'm recruiting people for the division that aren't even going to work for me. Because I've lived in this town for almost 30 years. I've been in here my whole career. So it's kind of like, hey, I'm the Culpeper guy, so you might sit in front and go, oh, I don't want to talk to this guy. But you got to remember, I can tell you everything there is to know about our division in the county. And sometimes that's more important than you sitting in front of one of our 6 elementary school principals, which I could then hand you right off to and say, hey, you need to go talk to so-and-so. And I might be stacking the deck because my wife works at one of the elementary schools and might be pushing you that way anyway. So the relationship is really important.
Well, thank you so much. Please, everyone, help us thank our panel here. It was wonderful. Just please put a little clap in the thank you in the chat. And you received such great information tonight. We'll have the recording out for you on the website. There'll be lots of tips both on the website as well as social media. So please look for those kinds of resources. And there will be so much in candidate registration. So please visit the website. And we, again, cannot thank our panel enough for all the wonderful information that they shared tonight. And they also provided quite a bit of resources in the sponsorship page. So make sure to look at that too. So thank you all so much. And we look forward to seeing you at the fair.